Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in Internet Shitlords. And today I'm probably going to be the last person to actually do a YouTube video about this topic, but you guys know I'll also be the best on the subject of the latest D&D SJW pogrom against orcs. You know, I think it's funny that they feel so that orcs are so objectionable, and yet D&D Twitter is littered with people's pictures of their erotic and or homoerotic orc art of their supposed player characters, which are, you know, half orcs or whatever. And somehow that's okay, right? I guess that's what they want orcs to be forced to turn into or something like that. But it's still, I mean, if the idea is that the mere traditional context of what you call an orc is enough for it to be uncurably racist and make people who play D&D racists, then, you know, how do you get away with that? How come they get to post pictures of their you know, homoerotic orc boys with their boyfriends, you know, or their tiefling whatevers, you know, stuff like that. So yeah, I think that there's a tremendous hypocrisy there. But let's get back to the beginning here to give you, because one of the things about my videos is that a lot of you who watch this aren't on Twitter or don't follow the crazinesses of D&D Twitter. So this is not the first time this has happened on Twitter. Every once in a while, maybe once every year or two, some SJW gets it in their head to declare that orcs are racists. You know, orcs represent this racist stereotype, and you're a racist for playing a game that has these racist orcs in it. And this is why D&D is bad, right? And they've done this again now. And this has caused a great deal of commotion in the hashtag, I guess maybe because everybody's quarantined and has nothing better to do. This ridiculous accusation. The accusation also expands to claim, well, you know, because orcs were invented by Tolkien, and Tolkien was racist, so, you know, that proves it. He was a eugenicist or something like, you know, like this nonsense they say. And then, you know, they're claiming basically you have to give us complete control of the RPG hobby and of D&D, or else you're a racist if your game has ever had an orc in it. Let me point out one thing, by the way. Arrows of Indra, no orcs. Lion and Dragon, no orcs. There are no orcs in either of these games or the settings connected to them. And the reason for that is that orcs aren't really a part of medieval history or ancient Indian history, right? So I write games based on authentic historical myth and legend, which is the really cool stuff. Now there is mention of the word orc is used in Beowulf, so it's in Old English. It's but that's a word that basically just means like evil spirit. It's derived from the same place you get the word orcus. But it's nothing to do with orcs as Tolkien reinterpreted them. And now the thing is, orcs, of course, in Tolkien aren't meant to be some kind of other race. It's very interesting how SJWs, and other people have pointed this part out, that SJWs will look at this description of orcs that appears in the monster manual, and it says that they're, you know, brutish and violent and savage and whatever, you know, and powerfully strong but not intelligent. And the first thing SJWs think of is people of color. You know, like, what is going on there, right? And you know, you could say, well, that means that, and I've made this argument on Twitter, other people have made this argument on Twitter, that it suggests that really the ones that are being racist are these guys, the SJWs, because there's nowhere in, you know, it doesn't, the connection of orcs with people of color of any specific kind is pretty much non-existent, you know? And yet they want to claim that orcs are basically black people in Tolkien, and therefore in D&D, and therefore you're a racist if there are orcs in D&D. Which is just nonsense, right? They also claim that, well, Tolkien was a terrible racist who described orcs as these kind of deformed Mongols. And okay, he does that once in a letter where he's being asked for a description of orcs because of the first attempt to make a movie out of Lord of the Rings. This was in 1958. He points out that they're not meant to look like Mongols, but they're meant to look like the deformed kind of stereotype that a person would have of Mongols. And by Mongols, he's not specifically meaning Chinese people, though if he was, it means that orcs are clearly not based on black people, right? But rather this stereotype of the Mongols, the historical Mongols that ravaged Europe, right? Like that's, if he has the one inspiration that you could say comes from history, it is of that, not of Mongols as a people or as a race or, you know, a Mongoloid racial group in humanity, Asians or whatever, but of specifically the Mongol horde, the ones that came and attacked and devastated everything in their path, destroyed China, destroyed the Middle East, and then came to Europe and tried to destroy Europe too. Okay, and that were seen as a horrible scourge that destroyed everything in their path, and for very good reason, because they largely did that. And that's exactly the sort of thing that orcs are meant to do, right? So, anyway, the point is that this is just ridiculous, because the SJWs will claim, well, look at the history of this man. Look at Tolkien's history, right? Well, okay, if you look at Tolkien's history, we have here a guy that on multiple and repeated occasions said that he absolutely rejected any kind of racialist theory, any kind of race doctrine, that he absolutely abhorred what was going on in the 1930s in Germany, to the point that he made a serious fight with his publisher not to translate his works into German at that time out of protest for the disgusting, what he called the pernicious and unscientific, I think that was what he said, an unscientific belief systems of these racial supremacists, you know. So he was a guy who was constantly dedicated in opposition to this sort of thing. You know, he repeatedly spoke against any type of thing that could be called eugenics. He totally spoke up in opposition to anti-Semitism. He refused to have Lord of the Rings be associated with the term Nordic in later years because he didn't want there to be any kind of suggestion that Lord of the Rings was something that could be co-opted by, you know, these Germanic-style white nationalists. So if you look at the history, Tolkien was a guy that was way ahead of his time in terms of his anti-racism. And yet SJWs, little worms that they are, have no problem with just, you know, declaring that he and all of his works must be gone forever because of the crime of racism that they've invented in their heads. And that's what all this comes down to. So here I'm going to get to the real point of the matter, right? We're in this time... Big Chungus, what's going on? She's scratching up the counter. Hey, calm down. Calm down. I know you're mad. You're offended on behalf of all Tolkien fans everywhere, but calm down. All right. So, you know, in this time of quarantine, we've been told by the broader community of SJWs, I guess the D&D SJWs were feeling left out, but the broader community of SJWs have been telling us stuff like that calling the COVID, the virus by the name of the place that it came from is racist, right? Even though that's the standard, you know, calling it the Spanish flu or, you know, Ebola fever, you know, those are all based on the names that they place. But no, if you say that, it means you're racist against Chinese people. And they've now upped the ante. If you criticize the Communist Party of China and the Communist government of China in any way, it proves you're racist against Chinese people, right? And everybody knows that's not true. Everybody knows that's not true, right? That's nonsense what these people are doing, and they know that it's nonsense. But what they want is to be able to put you in a position where you are forced to abandon truth and declare allegiance to their ideological values, right? Their ideological values are that it is more important to be obsessed with race than with dealing with this virus, right? And it is more important to say that the West is evil than that China is evil, right? China being non-Western is by definition to them better. And the fact that it's communist, even though now it's really communist in name only, is better to them, right? So what they're doing to you when they demand that any criticism of the Communist Party of China means that you're a racist, and that you have to acknowledge that, and you have to tell other people that they're racist if they're doing that. The reason they're pushing this so hard is that they want you to get to the point where you deny basic truth, right? So you have, that situation of the torturer holding up 3 fingers and saying, I have 4 fingers here, how many fingers do I have, right? Until the person breaks down. They know, the person being tortured knows, the torturer knows, everybody knows he's holding up 3 fingers. The actual point is to get you to say 4, because at that point you've broken your commitment to truth. And there, you are now their property, right? At that point, they can feed you any kind of totalitarian bullshit that they want. They can indoctrinate your children. You have surrendered. You've given up, probably because of pain, because of fear for your life, for your livelihood, for your work, for all kinds of other things. You've surrendered and said, yeah, okay, yes. Any challenge whatsoever against Xi Jinping is obviously racism against all Chinese people, and whoever does that should be, drummed out of a job forever. I agree. Just don't go after me because I'm agreeing with you, right? And that's it. You are now no longer moored to the truth, which means that they can now demand whatever narrative they want. They know that everything they're saying is lies. That's the whole basis of their ideology. Their ideology is that there's no such thing as truth. That all that you do is form a narrative to obtain power and use that power to create the social change that you want to create, right? And to dominate others and to remove others, right? So they're doing exactly the same thing with the orc things. Every single gamer knows that orcs are not racist, but they want to demand, to put pressure, to terrify people into saying that they are, because if you give up and accept that, then you're going to give up and accept everything else that they demand that you do, or that you let them do to you, right? So this is, 1984 Orc Edition, right? 2 + 2 = 5, and it has always equaled 5, right? And if you don't agree that it has always equaled 5, you're an enemy of the people, right? And you're gonna be ruined for that, right? This is what they're doing in this context as a way to gain power. They don't really think this. I mean, most of them don't. Some of them may have been indoctrinated to the point that they think it, because of course nowadays a lot of the younger gamers have literally been raised in an environment where they've been taught constantly that there's no such thing as truth. And they haven't been taught to think at all. They've been taught to obey. They've been taught to accept the indoctrination and to look for the signal of the virtue signaler, of the person that is going to tell them what they must think or not think, right? This is why you have these terrifying statistics of young people in colleges today demanding in huge percentages that their right to free speech be removed from them, as long as it's also removed from you, right? But that basically individuals shouldn't get to have the right to think or say what they want. They should be told what to think by people in positions of authority. That's the ultimate goal of these guys, right? They're these neo-communists, these neo-Stalinists, really, that want to control your life and control the world. And part of that, if you read the agendas and the strategy plans that have always existed in communist activism, is take over every element of society. Every element must be taken over, which is, and especially things like media and entertainment, education and games, right? All of these things are not trivial. It's not just a game to them. In fact, they don't give a shit about the game. The game doesn't matter to them. What matters to them is having the control over all of these areas, all areas of media, total control. That's where totalitarianism comes from, the word, right? Total control, so they can dictate the narrative at every level of society, in every corner of society, and there is nowhere to escape, right? So, they don't really believe that orcs are racist. Now, some people point out, well, but if you're saying this, it means you're the racist. And in a sense, that you could say that's true. Because, of course, SJWs have a lot of basic racism because they've been trained to see all of the world through a racial lens and to see, on the one hand, white people as being inherently evil, right? And always the wrong option, always the corrupt ones. But also to see as minorities as constantly helpless victims of these white people that need to be saved by other white people, which are the SJWs themselves, because most of the SJWs are nearly overwhelmingly white, right? So it wouldn't be surprising at all for them to see this description that they've got of an orc, of this, savage, violent, brutal, non-human. And the first thing that comes to their mind is black person. That's not the first thing that comes to any normal human being's mind, but to them it would, right? Even if they say, I don't believe that, it's you racists who believe that, and I'm just saying what racists like you are probably secretly thinking, right? First of all, nobody's secretly thinking that. Any racists that really exist, they're openly saying stuff like that, right? Like, of course, like Varg Vikernes made a game where, you're in Nazi Thule and the monsters there are basically subhuman races. He went out of his way to make them subhuman races and not, alien races that aren't human at all, the way orcs are. And where they're very clear analogies for black people and Jews, right? And Arabs, I believe, right? So this is an openly racist game, right? That's clear racism. But nobody else other than SJWs thinks that orcs are racist. That's not what they were intended to be by Tolkien. Tolkien has he has humans in Middle-earth that have dark skin, that are not white, right? So they're already there in Middle-earth. That wasn't why the orcs are there. The orcs are meant to represent the corruption of faithlessness and sin, right? A literal example of the corrupting nature of the godless world, right? Because they were changed by the evil force from elves, a creature that represents purity, into these dark, twisted versions of themselves. And this is because, and I'm amazed how few people get this, Lord of the Rings is a Catholic myth. It's a Catholic allegory. It's trying to take something akin to the old English and Norse sagas, but with a Catholic morality context to it. Because Tolkien was an extremely devout Catholic. That was the point of the orc, right? That's what the orc symbolizes. So many of these things are about the corruption of the world and the power of the very humble, small person of love, of individual brotherhood, of agape is what the Christian term for it would be, to be able to find a way to triumph in spite of the terrible corruption of the world. That's the message that Tolkien had in Lord of the Rings, right? But let's take for a second that the SJWs are saying are being honest, right? That they're not the ones that are racist, that automatically think of orcs as black people, but they're just assuming that other people would. That means that they're still thinking, the first thing they're thinking of is other people assume these are black people, right? Which means that they have been themselves imbued with the racist thinking, because the stereotype that immediately came to mind to them was precisely the racial, the racist stereotype of a black person that they will then associate with the archetype of the orc incorrectly, right? And that's really tragic. That's one of the tragic things about the SJW indoctrination system, where you have these kids that have been trained to see everything through a racial lens. So of course, in that racial lens, you're going to see, first of all, racism in everything. Nothing will ever be not racist enough for them, right? Until they've just crushed everything under their thumb, And on the other hand, it means that you unconsciously, at the same time, are adopting instead of defeating these racist assumptions that are prevalent, that were before prevalent only in the past and in the dirtiest corners of our modern liberal society. That's a real tragedy out of all of this. But anyways, these guys, fortunately, they have no real power. There's nothing they can really do except complain on Twitter. They wish they had real power. This is the sort of stuff they do because they don't, right? Every one of these SJWs, if they had the power, would be putting people in gulags and camps, right? In places like the Gulag Archipelago, where in the accounts there, this is exactly the sort of torture that they did to try to force people to break with their own reality, right? To demand that they declare proudly things that they know are not true, and that the person telling them this knows is not true, and everybody knows it's not true. The exercise of everybody together declaring something that nobody there in the room believes in for real is the exercise of submitting to totalitarianism. And that's exactly what they're doing with this orc thing, you know. and in a sense, you know, that sucks. In another sense, we're very lucky that none of these lunatics, that they're all really unsuccessful totalitarians or unsuccessful Stalinists. Because successful Stalinists create death camps and killing fields, you know. Anyways, I guess that's it for today. If you like this video, please share it everywhere. Share it where it'll piss off as many of these SJW dickheads as possible. And if you want to support my channel, well, I've got a PayPal and a Patreon page, and you're very welcome to donate to those. But I also have the option that you can pick up my products, right? The Arrows of Indra, Lion and Dragon, Dark Albion, the Medieval Authentic Companion, which is really my new and great source book for adding medieval authentic elements of all sorts of stuff, including real medieval magic, medieval treatments of monsters, medieval court life, etc., into your OSR, D&D, fantasy game, whatever. And if you can't afford one of my regular books, even though my regular books are not super expensive, you could also check out the RPG Pundit Presents PDF series. It's got 99 issues, and each one is somewhere between $1.99 and maybe $4.99. And with your purchase, you get a product that is going to add something to your OSR, D&D type adventuring, be it high-tech weapons, robot generators, medieval authentic magic, weird medieval monsters, adventures of different kinds, everything running the gamut from, you know, medieval authentic stuff in the vein of Lion and Dragon, all the way to really weird gonzo fantasy, and everything in between. There's items, adventures, source books, setting stuff. So check it out and buy a few of the RPG Pundit Presents series to entertain yourself in your games while your virtual games, I suppose, for most of you, while you're being quarantined. And I guess that's everything for today. Remember, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, hit the bell, and share this video. Thank you so much, guys. Like it, too. Currently smoking Italian Red Bark plus Argento Latacchia.